Hello, everyone from me in Switzerland, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all, as I know we have people joining from all over the world. Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Olya Abasolo-Ovchinnikova. I'm an Olympian and the education manager at the International Testing Agency. So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to the September edition of the ITA monthly webinar series. Our topic today, as you know, is integrity. And more specifically, we will speak about competition manipulation and anti-doping. But before I introduce you to our topic in more detail and to our panelists, please allow me to do a bit of housekeeping today. So first and foremost, a reminder that we are delivering this webinar in 5 languages. So on your Zoom menu, you should see a function called interpretation. So if you click on that icon, you can listen to today's session in Arabic, French, Russian, or Spanish. The slides and the primary presentation by myself and our panelists will be in English, but you are, of course, welcome to select another channel to listen to the audio. So a few more housekeeping points before we go on. Please do use the chat function to say hello, and I can see many of you are already writing in the chat. So hello from Sierra Leone, Tekbal, India, Philippines, Sri Lanka. We've got many greetings coming in from IDTM as well, Brazil, Bosnia. So hello everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. So you are already using the chat for any general comments, and we encourage you to continue using this chat for interaction with us and the panelists. And you're more than welcome to use the Q&A box as well for any questions. Our final note for today is that the webinar is being recorded for anyone who is not able to join live, and we'll post it on the ITA website and our YouTube channel afterwards. So today's webinar is part of our monthly series that are publicly available and designed to tackle key anti-doping topics and to raise clean sport awareness. So a big thank you to everyone who joins us every month. And of course, a welcome to anyone joining for the first time as well. So many more greetings coming in: Qatar, again, Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Tekbal Federation. Thank you so much. And somebody's asking if there will be poll questions. Yes, of course, we'll always have poll questions. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our official presenting partner for the webinar, and that is Informed Sport. Informed Sport is a global certification program for supplements that batch tests products for substances prohibited in sport. As supplement contamination continues to be the leading cause of inadvertent doping, we're happy to partner up with Informed Sport for this educational project. So of course, we encourage all athletes and athlete support personnel who are using supplements or considering using supplements to go to sportwetestYoutrust.com and to make sure that you check all of your products. All right, one last bit of introduction before we move into today's topic, and that is that the ITA is proud to be recognized by UNESCO as a leading international organization for the delivery of anti-doping programs. And this educational webinar is delivered with support of the UNESCO International Convention Against Doping in Sport. But back to the theme of today's webinar. Today, we are covering the wider topic of integrity. We will shortly look at the definition of integrity, but what we already know is that the term covers a broad range of topics, from safeguarding to anti-doping, ethical behavior, match fixing, betting, and the list goes on. Over the last 8 sessions of the 2021 series, we solely focused on the area of anti-doping. However, doping itself is often not a standalone problem, but a combination of existing issues in the athlete's environment. Therefore, any individual or organization addressing doping issues must take the larger concept of integrity into consideration. So today, we will look at one particular aspect of integrity, and that is competition manipulation. We'll also explore how the topics of anti-doping and competition manipulation are interconnected, particularly when it comes to values, decision-making, moments of vulnerability, education, prevention, and the role of athlete entourage. So at this point, I will introduce our panelists for the day. Presenting this topic with me is a fantastic team of experts, and I will introduce them one by one now, and they will be able to say hello from by turning on their cameras as well. So joining us from Lausanne is Rita Ahmed and Laura Schoch. Rita and Laura are the awareness raising team with the Olympic movement on the prevention of manipulation of competitions. So firstly, Rita has been with the International Olympic Committee since 2019, firstly with the Athletes Commission and the Athletes Entourage Commission, and now with the Unit on the Prevention of Manipulation of Competitions. Rita is a graduate of the International Academy of Sports Science and Technology, or ASTS for short, where she was recognized as the 2019 Future Female Leader in Sport Scholarship. Welcome, Rita.
Hi, Olia, and hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to a great session ahead. So thanks, Olia.
Thanks, Rita. I'll now introduce Laura, who has been with the IOC since 2016, and prior to working on prevention of competition manipulation, she worked at the Olympic Studies Center. Laura holds a Master of Arts in Political Science, Public Policy Analysis from the University of Lausanne, and helpfully for this webinar in particular, Laura speaks 5 languages. So I'm not sure if I should say bonjour, hola, Laura, but great to have you here with us today.
Hi, Olia. Thank you. And hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having our team in this webinar. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
The pleasure's all ours. And I will now introduce our third panelist of the day, and that is Gabriel Sagastume. I want to make sure I get that right. A 2-time Olympian in the sport of Taekwondo, having represented Guatemala at the Olympic Games in Sydney in 2000 and in Athens in 2004. Stepping off the field of play was only a start of Gabriel's successful career in sports. He currently is the Prevention of Competition Manipulation Ambassador, the Athletes Commission Chair for the Guatemala NOC, a Pan Am Sports Technical Commission member, and an international Taekwondo referee. Gabriel currently holds the position of the Executive Director with the Guatemalan National Council of Sports, Physical Education, and Leisure. And just to make sure that Gabriel stays extra busy, he's also writing his thesis as part of the Master of Arts in Olympic Studies program with the German Sport University. Hola, Gabriel.
Good morning, Olia. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here this early morning here in Guatemala. We just have 6 a.m. and it's great to share all these topics that are very important for people around sports. So we're going to have a nice webinar and we're going to learn a lot, and I will be gladful to share all my experience with all of you. So a big hope for you. Thank you.
Fantastic, Gabriel. Thank you so much for being here with us. And you're my fellow Olympic Studies student, so a small community here. Lovely to have this connection.
Thank you, Olia.
Well, since I have you, Gabriel, maybe before we dive into the definitions and the details of the topic, I will address my first question to you. And I think it's a nice warm-up question for everyone to hear a little bit more about you as well. So I would ask you how you became involved in competition manipulation and how you became an ambassador for this cause, and also why you decided to be here with us today.
Okay, well, in 2019, I had the opportunity to participate as an NOC Athlete Commission chair in Lausanne, Switzerland, in the Athlete Forum. And well, I saw a booth over there with information about these topics. Well, when I was an athlete, I always I always think about this kind of problems that could lead the sports to have this kind of topics we're gonna discuss today. Well, in that time, I start talking with the people that were in that booth, and they start contact me later on, and of course I keep participating on these topics, and I start also delivering some information to my fellow athletes as an athlete commission president. I'm very conscious about the risk of for the athletes to get banned and suspended on their sport because of this kind of actions. Many athletes don't know that, and getting involved in bets and can lead them to have sanctions. Also, as an athlete, we must be aware that this is real and exists, and are also persons on your entourage that can offer you to lose on purpose, offer you money, or so on. So always report this and don't be afraid. All these damages is real spirit of the sport, and also the sportsmanship and clean sport always have to prevail. So that's why I'm here, and I always try to lead some programs here in Guatemala and all the athlete commissions.
Excellent. So that is exactly the reason why many of our fellow members of the sport community are joining today. And so hopefully we will take you through some useful information in the next hour or so that will help you feel more empowered and more educated and more prepared in whatever role you hold in your sport community. So on that note, thanks again, Gabriel. Let's take a look at the agenda for today and at the topics that we'll cover. So I will briefly introduce the overall concept of integrity and speak about how it connects to values. And following this, Rita and Laura will speak about competition manipulation specifically. So we'll also look at different factors that lead to competition manipulation and tie these in with the concept of moments of vulnerability that we use in anti-doping. Next, we'll look at consequences, both of competition manipulation, but also of anti-doping and how these overlap. We'll also discuss how competition manipulation can be detected, covering a few basic but important rules that you can apply to protect yourself as an athlete or athlete support personnel. Finally, we'll speak about the role of athlete entourage, as athlete support personnel play a key role in protecting and informing the athletes. And remember, the Q&A function is open throughout this webinar, so feel free to address your questions to Laura, Rita, Gabriel, or myself. So before looking at competition manipulation, let's zoom out and try to answer the question on your screens. What is integrity in sport? And indeed, it is very difficult to provide one definition of integrity, as it means many things. It also means different things to different people. So it can be something on a scale. So my definition of integrity may be slightly different than somebody who is listening in today, or even one of the panelists. So we can use one particular definition as an example here, and that is the one of the National Integrity of Sport Unit of Australia. It defines sport integrity as the manifestation of the ethics and values which promote community confidence in sport, including fair and honest performances and outcomes, unaffected by illegitimate enhancements or external interests, and positive conduct by athletes, administrators, officials, and other stakeholders on and off the field of play, which enhances the reputation and standing of the sporting events and of sport as a whole. So that is just one definition, but in other words, it means that integrity covers a wide range of topics and concerns the moral and ethical aspects of sport. So with this definition of integrity, we can look at competition manipulation now. And specifically, Rita, I hand it over to you to make a few additional comments to this slide.
Thanks, Olia. You know, this, in my opinion, is one of the really nice definitions that we have, because it can really help us understand the concept of integrity in sport at a more comprehensive topic. You know, a lot of times when we are talking to athletes or entourage about integrity, the topic of doping will always come up, because that's what people have associated with as cheating, because you're cheating to win. But what people might tend to not realize a lot of times is that competition manipulation or match fixing, and we'll go into detail shortly about what that is exactly, but that is also a type of cheating. So I think we tend to think that if you're cheating to win, that's bad, that's wrong. But if you're losing on purpose, then that can't be as bad or be at the same level. But the reality is that it does pose just as big a risk to integrity and fair, honest competition as doping would. So hopefully today can help our audience understand the topic a bit more in depth, and realize that both are integrity issues and both are equally important and need to be addressed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think Gabriel is with us. He just maybe turned off his camera, so I can't see him. Yes, you are here. But I'll tag on to Rita's comment here. Most of the time, we think of doping as the key area of integrity, but there's many other aspects. So maybe in your opinion or your experience now as an athlete representative in so many capacities, what are some of the biggest integrity risks in sport today?
Okay, adding to what Rita just said about competition manipulation, match fixing, I think we have a problem related with the lack of information. Usually for athletes, the knowledge is important. That every time we have this kind of topics and seminars or webinars, it's very important that athlete can get involved with this. And the environment is very important. The environment must promote healthy and autonomous decision making. It's very relevant, but I think that only focusing on the results or medals at any cost. First of all, as an educators, administrators, coaches, sports leaders, our biggest challenge is to generate better human beings, better citizens, and getting results is necessary because we need medals, we need to measure the investment that our countries do, and most cases, unfortunately. But to develop integral athletes, environments, and organization has to take this with a lot of compromise and be aware with the message we send our athletes. Lack of information, as I told you, is an issue. Usually we don't talk about this, just see information on news or media that some events and competitions that are manipulated to get certain results. And some athletes get suspended and banned for 2-4 years and even banned for life. I think when money goes on the equation, athletes can be tempted, but they don't see the whole picture and the whole consequences with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, Gabriel, you nailed it right here at this point, that sometimes the motivations are not the right ones. And that's kind of a good link now to an exercise that may be a little bit abstract to some of our listeners, but I think it's a worthwhile one. When we talk about integrity, we know these key areas of what not to do. Don't dope, don't match fix, don't bet. But one thing you do, and that's applies to anyone working in sport, is that you follow your values in any of your decision making. And values are indeed a key part of integrity if you look at any definition that's out there. So for the purpose of today's session, we thought it would be worthwhile to kick off with a values exercise with everybody who is on this session today. It's a small exercise and it's quite easy. So in the next few slides, you'll see a series of values, and we've translated them to different languages. So of course, these are not all the values that exist out there, but we shortened the list for the purpose of today's presentation. So what we'll do to kick off this session is think of your values as a person, but then think of your values as an athlete or athlete support personnel. And just note whether these values are different or not. Chances are they will be very similar. Then you can think of 3 values that best represent clean sports, but also all other areas of sport integrity. So here you'll be able to see our first slide, which should be in English. So we encourage anybody who is willing to share to write your values in the chat box. Right now you're seeing the English version, but we'll also rotate through all the other languages. You can also note for yourself the values that you choose as a person and as an athlete or athlete support personnel. So the list has many values from excellence, power, wealth, empathy, but also other ones like faith and love. So here we are now on Spanish. Gabriel, maybe if you had a chance to choose your top 3 values, what would those be?
Well, do you want to say it in Spanish or in English?
Your choice. I'm sure we'll
Okay.
understand.
Great. Well, excellence. I think excellence, it's a very important value. It leads you to give you the best in anything you do in sport and in life as well. 100%, 110% in everything you do. It's very important for me. Inspiration, since I was an athlete or now as a administrator and leader in some areas, is very important. It's related with the legacy to the others, and to be a leader, it's really important to inspire future generations. And the other one, the last but not least, integrity is very important to make decisions and guide all your life. So that's my 3 top values, and I use it as when I was an athlete, and now as an administrator also, it keeps the same for me.
I wouldn't say there's a good or a bad answer, but you certainly gave an excellent explanation of your values. So thank you. I can see many people writing their values, and thank you for sharing. Well, I'll read out a few here. People are writing integrity, honesty, respect, stewardship, respect, determination. A lot of excellence coming in through the chat. Thank you everyone for sharing. Selflessness as well. Maybe we can see another language that we have. We give a chance to all the listeners to respond. And the key thing to understand about these values is that they're personal. So of course there's no right or wrong. And why we are talking about values at the start of this session is because these guide your decisions. And these guide your decisions every day, but also during very difficult moments. So we'll talk about these difficult moments in just a second. So my values are equality, respect, and inspiration, I think was a good one, like Gabriel. We agree on this one. Rita, Laura, have you had a chance to select your values as well?
I'll go first. So I picked the ones for loyalty, empathy, and of course, integrity. And it's so nice to see that a lot of the integrity is coming through in the chat box as well.
Look, yeah, go ahead.
And I think, of course, I chose integrity as well. As Gabriel said, integrity leading every decision, professional, in your personal lives. And then progress is very important for me. Empathy as well, as we don't achieve anything alone. So I would say these are my 3 main values.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for sharing your responses. Even if it's a simple exercise, sometimes it's worthwhile to stop and pause and really ask yourself why we do what we do, whether we're athletes or athlete support personnel, coaches, administrators as ourselves. And I think it all starts with values. So for the topic of integrity, it's really an appropriate way to kick off the session. Values also apply to organizations. So we can quickly look at Olympic and Paralympic values and their friendship, respect, and excellence as Olympic values, and determination, inspiration, courage, and equality for Paralympic values. So many of you have actually selected the same ones. And I think that's the main reason why we are so attracted to the Olympic and Paralympic movement, because we share the same values. So with this rather long introduction, I encourage you to keep your values in mind as we go through this presentation. So at this point, I will now give the floor to Laura to introduce the topic of competition manipulation in more detail.
Thank you. Thank you, Olia. Thank you very much for this really nice introduction to the broader topic of integrity. And now to come to competition manipulation specifically, we'll start by showing you a very short video on the topic, and we will then discuss a bit more in detail about what it means and what competition manipulation looks like and what are the risks related to it.
Cheating in sport. Doping. Violent conduct. But what about losing on purpose to win money on a bet? Or to face an easier opponent in the next round? This is called competition manipulation, or match fixing. It kills the competition, the excitement, the drama. It kills the motivation for clean athletes and fans. It kills the spirit of sport. disrespecting your team, disrespecting your opponents, disrespecting your fans. You can make a difference. Don't bet on your sport. Don't fix, always do your best. Don't share inside information and always report.
Thank you. So this gave you a very brief overview of competition manipulation. As it was mentioned in the video, competition manipulation is very often referred to as match fixing. So it is the same thing, it is the same problem. The reason why we call it competition manipulation rather than match fixing is because as the International Olympic Committee, we cover all sports on the Olympic program, and not all sports are played in matches. So it's just a terminology to be more inclusive. Now I have a little question for you. We will come to the polls. I know you were looking forward to them. What do you think is competition manipulation? So is it an athlete losing on purpose? Is it a referee purposely altering the game by making a wrong decision? Is it both things, so all of the above, or is it none of the things, none of these options? So you will have a few seconds to answer the question. All of the above. Very good. So a large majority of you answered correctly to this question, which I think was an important one to set at the start of this section on competition manipulation. Because the topic is a little bit unknown so far, as my colleague Rita mentioned at the beginning, when we speak about integrity in sport, when we speak about cheating, very often, the topic that comes up in athletes' minds and in public opinion's mind is doping. However, competition manipulation is a real threat for sports integrity, and it can take different forms. As we said, an athlete can be losing on purpose. We will see the different reasons why this can happen, but it can also be a referee altering the competition, its outcome, for a certain advantage in return. So now I have a few more questions for you very briefly before we go into more detailed explanation. So apologies, I cannot.
I'm just pulling up the poll here, so you should see the first one.
Okay, so competition manipulation only affects specific sports, depending on their nature. Is this right or wrong?
And we're closing the polls when we get about 50% of the responses. So I hope everybody, I know that not everybody will get a chance to vote, but we just want to make sure we stay on track. So we've got 55%. So here we go. I will share the results.
And it's false. Of course, congratulations. Many of you, a large majority, answered correctly to this question. Competition manipulation affects any sport in different ways. Not all sports have the same level of vulnerabilities, and not all sports are affected for the same reasons. It can be depending on the sport structure. We know that some sports have been in the media more than others for match fixing. I think about football, of course, but I also think about racket sports, tennis, etc. Or it can be for other vulnerability factors that we will also cover later on in this webinar. I have a second question for you, a true or false. So competition manipulation is the same as match fixing. We will see if I have been, my explanations have been clear at the start. Is it true or is it false?
The answers are coming in very quickly. So we're close to 50%. So let's share the results.
And yes, as we said, so competition manipulation is the same as match fixing. As we said, you will very often read it in the news under the terms match fixing, but it is the same, just that not all sports are played in matches, and that's why we refer to this issue as competition manipulation. And then if we move on to the last question about the topic, competition manipulation is impossible to detect. It can only be prevented through awareness raising. Do you think this is true or false?
Again, let's give it just a couple of seconds. People are also writing in the chat, which is great. So both work, but you're more than welcome to answer the poll question. It's all anonymous. All right, let's end the poll.
It is false. So a majority of you answered correctly to this question, although I see the balance is a little more tight with 30 and 70%. These questions were actually for us to be able to measure a little bit your knowledge on this topic. And we really hope that the webinar will answer all these questions more in detail. And as Olia said, at the end of this session, we should have time for questions if you still have any. But I won't go into too many details about these 3 specific questions because our presentation is aimed at giving the answers to them. So if we move on to the next slide, what is competition manipulation? So as we said, competition manipulation can be either athletes losing on purpose, and this can be for a sporting advantage, like depending on the format of the competition. Sometimes you might be tempted to lose a match in order to face an easier opponent in the next round of the competition. It can be that an athlete is tempted to cheat for money. So this is usually happening when bets come in. For sure, you know that bets are being placed on every sport. We recently had the Tokyo Olympics, and we can confirm bets are being placed on every single event at the Olympic Games, but also on every sport outside of the Olympic Games. So with this comes a threat and a temptation to fix the game in order to win some money on a bet. You might be tempted to lose on purpose, either because someone approaches you and asks you to lose on purpose to make a bet successful, or we also have seen, unfortunately, athletes betting against themselves and then losing so that they could at least earn the money. So in general, competition manipulation is the fact of altering the competition, not only its outcome. You can be fixing a tennis match by only losing the second set, but then still managing to win the match. So it can affect the course of the competition. But the whole thing about this problem is that it removes the unpredictability of sport. What is it that makes sports so exciting for you, either as an athlete to compete or just as a fan to watch on TV or to watch in a stadium? Is that you don't know the results. Is that until the very last second, you don't know who's going to win. So if this unpredictability, if this question mark is removed, the competition just has no sense anymore. So this is why competition manipulation is really killing the very essence of sports if we let it grow and if we don't do prevention from this early stage. We really have a lot at stake here by protecting sport from this threat. One last note here before we move on to another short video about why competition manipulation is increasing quite fast and quite a lot. So with today's globalization and the evolution of the communication technologies, everyone can place bets on sports competition from anywhere in the world and at any point in time. So the betting market has become accessible to anyone, basically with a phone, with a laptop and an internet connection. Also, it's important to mention that criminal organizations may be involved in these cases of competition manipulation. And these are networks that have become transnational. Legislations in the different countries of the world are starting to consider competition manipulation as a criminal offense. Sports regulations are being adapted also to face the threat, but still we need to really make an effort today on prevention to make sure the problem doesn't become any bigger. So with this said, we are moving on to a very short video to explain this in detail, after which my colleague will explain to you, my colleague Rita, sorry, will explain to you a little bit more in detail how concretely you can be faced with this problem as an athlete.
The internet and globalization have led to the globalization of sports and sport betting. At any point in time, there are thousands of bets available. Bets can be placed on different sports, different events in those sports, or even placed live while the competition is taking place. As the betting market gets bigger, more global and more complex, so does betting-related competition manipulation. Imagine if athletes and officials were allowed to bet. How tempting would it be for them to alter how they perform? There is so much money involved that some malicious people even try to lure athletes, coaches, and referees into competition manipulation. You are not allowed to disclose inside information, team tactics, injuries, or other information about yourself, your team, or your opponents. This inside information could be used for betting purposes. Make the right decision. Don't bet on your sport. Don't fix and always do your best. Don't share inside information and always report.
Great. So now you all have had an introduction to competition manipulation. You know what it is at the basic level. But now I wanted to talk to you about how this kind of manipulation can take place in terms of athletes and entourage getting involved. So the very first thing that you need to remember is that anyone can be approached to fix their competition. Anyone who has a direct influence on the competition, on the field of play. This could be the athletes as well as the referees, in some instances the coaches as well. And these groups of athletes, referees, coaches, they might decide to fix their competition themselves. Or what else we could see is that they are approached by someone who is going to ask or pressure them to fix their competition. So this sort of approach, it can also come from anyone. We know of cases where athletes might be approached by other athletes in their team or in the opposing team. They might be approached by their own coach, other entourage members, someone in their family, friend circle even, someone that they know already and have a trust-based relationship with. But also equally, it can come from someone who you've never met before, a stranger, someone who introduces themselves as a fan, for example. And what happens there is that they try and build a relationship with you. So in a lot of instances that we hear of, they might offer you something very small. They might come up to you and say, wow, Rita, I'm a big fan. I watched your competition. You're so good. Can I buy you a coffee? You know, something simple like that, something very small, very innocent. And you might not think that that means anything, but it does help them create a bond with you, start building a relationship with you. They might start texting you more and more until they can approach you to ask you for a small favor. And this could be something, again, that you don't think will impact your competition. You might think that it's not even going to be noticed, something you could probably get away with, and also you can kind of pay them back for what they have given you so far. But what the problem is that if it happens once, it 100% can happen again. And we know of many situations now where athletes did do one small thing or 2, 3 small things, but the manipulators came back for more. They'll always come back for more. So this might happen 3, 4 times, and then perhaps the 5th or the 6th time, it is something big. It is something serious enough that raises flags for you and you don't want to do it. However, at this point, it's already too late for you to say no, because you are already in that kind of a vicious circle that the manipulator has made around you. So they already have what they need from you in order to keep you. They can blackmail you. They can put pressure on you. We have heard some stories from athletes who really didn't want to give in, but they were threatened, they were blackmailed, and in some of the even more sad cases, they've had their family members also threatened if they didn't cooperate. So it can turn into a quite scary situation at that point. And that's why it's so important for us to raise awareness on this, so athletes know at the first instance what they need to do and how they can protect themselves from being vulnerable to potential manipulators in the future. Now, on the next slide, we'll see a list of factors that could make certain individuals perhaps more vulnerable to being targeted by corruptors. And the reason for going through this is just for you to be aware, recognize these either in yourself or potentially other teammates around you, and just to understand better why this could lead to vulnerability. So the very first point is of young age. The younger an athlete or an entourage member is, the more vulnerable they could be, for 2 reasons. Firstly, that they have less awareness on what is right, what isn't. They might not be aware of the rules. But also secondly, because they have less experience in terms of what is normal interaction with a fan or a stranger, what is normal exchange of conversation, what is confidential information versus public information. And that's something that we'll talk more about in a few slides as well. The second one is marginal stakes. Now, this is talking about the situation if there is an event competition where the outcome doesn't really impact your qualification for the next rounds, for example. So you saw in the video, sometimes it might not really make a difference who's going to win. Maybe it's a friendly match. Maybe it's not an eliminating match. Or there might be matches where there's less chances of an athlete winning anyway, so they're willing to throw that match anyway. Those kind of competitions, of course, can be a bit more vulnerable to being manipulated in exchange for financial gains. Then the third one we have is insufficient revenue. Of course, if an athlete or entourage member is facing financial difficulties, then they could be more susceptible to participating in betting and fixing. Number 4 is end of career. This one is also for 2 reasons. One is that people feel like they have nothing to lose. So if they're going to retire soon, if they're going to leave sport soon, then it's okay if they get caught because it's not going to make a difference. We'll tell you in a few slides why that is not the case. But the second reason is also because people feel like they have more pressure to do more and to make as much money as possible in the time that they have left. So they can be more likely to do whatever it takes to get that money, even if it's by illegal or by dangerous means. And then the last factor that we have is a gambling addiction. This one is as an example to stress that the manipulators and corruptors, they will often do their research on their potential targets. So they will know more about you than you think. And for athletes who have a history, for example, in gambling or in sports betting specifically, they can be more likely to be targeted. At this point, actually, it would be nice to have Olia's input as well, because I think there can be some interesting contrast here with the vulnerability factors in doping.
Absolutely. We can take a look at the next slide because there's so much overlap between certain factors that contribute to an athlete's decision or lack of decision around competition manipulation and doping. So we'll go through what's called moments of vulnerability. So we do have social science research that shows that athletes are more likely to dope when they are at a difficult time in their career or in their life. And so what we're going to do is go through these factors as well, and then look at how match fixing and doping overlap in so many ways. So some of the moments of vulnerability, according to social science research, are first changing clubs or changing training environments. So for example, when an athlete is invited to move to a centralized training location. Also entering higher level of competition. So making your first national team as an athlete, or making the senior team, qualifying for the Olympic Games. The third moment of vulnerability is the opposite. So loss in competition, or not performing well or up to your expectations or others' expectations. And that ties in with the pressure to win. So the pressure can come from different areas. It can be self-imposed by the athlete, but it can also be imposed by entourage. And it can be financial, it can be emotional. So of course, there's a strong link here to financial pressure. That is often the case for both match fixing and doping. And finally, we've got injuries, but it's not an exhaustive list of moments of vulnerability. So here we have 5 factors, but it can also be personal moments in athletes' lives. So if they're going through a difficult time, if it's a divorce, if it's a breakup, if it's a loss of a loved one, those are all considered moments of vulnerability. So why we've shown these to you back to back is because they just have so much overlap, different areas of integrity, and how athletes' behaviors may be affected have a lot of factors in common between different areas that we just presented. And so equally, weaknesses identified by Rita have a direct link to doping, and weaknesses or moments of vulnerability identified here have a direct link to match fixing. And so wrapping up this particular section, I just have a question for Gabriel, and I'd like to bring him back in for the athlete opinion here. And the question is quite direct. Were you ever tempted? Did you ever have moments of vulnerability or high risk moments when you were tempted to fix a match or to dope, or perhaps you've witnessed it in your surroundings?
Well, I was never tempted to dope, or because I was aware of the risk. I use nutritional supplements. I like proteins, other vitamins, always check them, but do not have prohibited substance on it. But I was pretty aware of the risk. Related to competition manipulation or match fixing, not really. Also, I was never related, but when I was competing in 2000, 2004, 2008, when I was retired, I see some of these kind of attitudes in other events or tournament, but never was involved in that. As a referee also in the other area, I had the opportunity to participate in big events and big tournaments. I've seen some wrong decisions. Referees can get wrong sometimes, but when it comes or when if it was done on purpose, it's very bad, and it destroyed the true spirit of sport. So in that way, that what was one of the important motivations of why I become a referee, international referee. And I had both point of view as an athlete, as a referee, and I try to make a contribution to the sport. So in that way, I think it's very important to all the athletes have this very clear, and to not make wrong decisions.
Before preparing, thank you so much, Gabriel. While preparing for this presentation, I was thinking about the topic, and I realized that I was exposed in so many ways as an athlete. And we always think it's a distant concept, but perhaps if you allow me 1 minute to share as well, that I've witnessed athletes who had no chance to make the national team being requested by their coach to help their teammate by losing the match, because the other athlete would have a chance to make the national team. I've witnessed that, as well as having seen an athlete who already qualified for Olympic Games. My sport is fencing, a combat sport. Having been asked by a national coach of another country to lose the match because they already qualified. And by winning that match, the other athlete would have qualified for Olympics. And so a lot of the time you feel like you're helping, like you're doing the right thing. And I think that's the sentiment in both of those circumstances. So to think back now to those cases and what I would have done, I'm not sure, because it's such a difficult decision. You think you're helping a friend. So those are my brief experiences with match fixing, and I think they're real. We've seen it. Most of us can recall some sort of experience, whether firsthand or removed. So it's a very, very important topic to discuss, and I'm happy we're able to tackle the two topics of doping and competition manipulation together. So I think we are on to consequences now. And so I am going to hand it back to Laura to look at the next section as it relates to consequences of competition manipulation.
Thank you, Olya. And I think it links very well to what you were just sharing as your personal experience, both you and Gabriel. When you say you think you are going to help a teammate, in reality, I think it's very important to explain here that most of the cases we have had at the Olympics are cases of people who didn't want to manipulate, who didn't even fix the competition, but who were not aware of what it meant as a risk to be breaching the rules on match fixing. We will detail these rules further in the presentation so that you are all well informed about them. And I highlight also the fact that Gabriel mentioned twice the problem of lack of information of the athletes. And then he said, I was never tempted because I was aware of the risk. And I think this is really important. Even if it's not the funniest part we like to communicate, it is important that when you make a decision, you know what consequences it will have, either right or wrong, but you make an informed decision, right? So the specific consequences for match fixing, of course, you have the sports sanctions that can apply with bans that can be from a few weeks up to a life ban that come also with fines. Sanctions on the criminal side of things. We mentioned earlier that a growing number of countries is recognizing competition manipulation as a criminal offense. This comes with sanctions such as jail, important fines, depending on the countries where the breach takes place. But I think most importantly, beyond the sports sanctions, beyond the criminal sanctions, are the consequences on your personal life, right? If you get involved in competition manipulation, whether it was your intention or not, what will remain even when your sports career is done, even when you paid your fine and you came out of prison, is that your name will be tarnished, your reputation is ruined. These things stay on the internet, in the public knowledge, and your name and your family's name follow you for your entire life. We have one of Gabriel's fellow ambassadors on our program, who's a young man who got involved in competition manipulation in football. You know, for the same reason that you said, that he wasn't aware of the risks. He got tempted for the money, he was facing financial difficulties, and he didn't know the consequences. This person tells us, you know, we cannot imagine the impact it can have on you, not only as an athlete or as a coach, but as a person. This person was threatened. His family was pointed at in their neighborhoods. He got a lot of mental health issues. He even confessed he wanted to commit suicide. So now, luckily, this person found a way through awareness raising to recover. But I think it's really important that athletes are aware of this full picture before entering a wrong decision like this. And I understand consequences for breaching the rules on doping are very similar here again, Olia. So I'm happy to hear more about it also.
Yeah, of course. And we do spend a lot of time in our webinars talking about different consequences. So I won't go to too much detail, but you should see a slide that has a few words. These are a few words that describe the consequences of doping. What's interesting for us for the purpose of today's session is that perhaps aside from the direct effects of physical health, all the effects of the negative consequences of doping can carry over to any area of integrity. So really, I will go through just 4 key areas with you today for the purpose of the presentation. And I will not describe each one in detail, but rather we've put up a few athlete quotes to really present it to you from the athlete perspective. So the 4 areas, we'll start with our sanctions, because that's really the most tangible and the most evident one when we think of doping, is when an athlete gets sanctioned. And a quote on the screen here is from one of the athletes who participated in a webinar that we ran last year or earlier this year. And, you know, I think it gives a good example of how the sanctions have affected him, and he's been able to come back and compete now in Tokyo. Now, if we look at physical health, again, this is specific to anti-doping, but very important to mention today as part of sanctions. Of course, what we need to know about the substances that are added to the prohibited list is they're added not just because they enhance sport performance, but because they're bad for your health. And so a lot of the doping that's being done is in hiding, in secrecy, by people who are not qualified to do so, in the wrong dosage with extremely negative health effects, and not enough is told about it because it's done in so much secrecy. But there are a few athletes that are speaking up. As you can see, Andreas Krieger, that's a famous case of a German athlete. Mental health, a big one that carries over to all areas of integrity. And important to note in mental health, as in competition manipulation, the effects will be there, the consequences will be there regardless whether or not you get caught. So I thought that was an important quote from Tyler Hamilton, a cyclist who's speaking about how he's being affected while he's doping without ever testing positive. And finally, the long-term effects. And Laura spoke to this already, so I'll be very brief here. The long-term effects of doping or competition manipulation, we can speak to both, are very, very important to consider. How much your life changes in different aspects of your life, how your image changes for the public, but also for your family and your immediate entourage. So very quick review here of the consequences. We didn't go into too much detail, but wanted to present these key areas here. And so I think at this point, we have a few more minutes and we need to still cover competition manipulation detection, which Rita will speak about. But before I hand it over to Rita, I'll bring in Gabriel for another quick question. And that is regarding, again, witnessing doping or witnessing competition manipulation. As we know, it's not black or white. You don't necessarily see someone taking a pill and putting in their mouth or handing a bribe. So were there times when you were seeing something, but you were not sure what it was? And did you know what to do with this information?
Well, Elia, I think as an athlete, sometimes we see something and we don't know, we think something is wrong over there. So I see some suspicious behaviors on an international event one time with some athletes and some coaches, and it seems like they were dealing something there. I really don't know what to do in that cases at that time. Later on, it was a big scandal related with this. As I told you, I've seen referees sometimes purposely alter games by making wrong decisions in very important tournaments. As a former athlete and a referee, I have both point of view. And remember, all athletes, they train all their life. They wait in this opportunity for all the sports life. And it's very unfair, these kind of things, and can affect them at all levels. As an athlete commission chair, I have a meeting once with a tennis athlete, and he was suspended for accepting a payment for losing on purpose. And it was not even a big event. It was a second level tournament. That's very important to share, because sometimes we think, oh, it's only the Olympic finals or big events or big tournaments. No, it's in different levels, third level, second level games. And this guy was suspended for accept payment for losing on purpose. It was not big money, and this guy had a good ranking at that time, and it was a big international investigation related with net of athletes and some people that are in entourage, and well, they have some behavior, suspicious behavior in that events, and this leads to the suspension of various athletes, and various of them. And this is not only happens on big events, as I told you. And for this attitude, he lose the support he had and was suspended for official competitions about 2 years or a little bit more. So that's all. You take the risk, but at the end you have more to lose than to win, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Rita, I think now this leads nicely into detecting of competition manipulation, as often we see something, but we don't know what it is or what to do with that information. So let's spend a few minutes on this part right here.
Thanks, Olia. And in fact, one of the questions that we had at the beginning was saying, do you think it's harder to detect competition manipulation? And I know a few people would have answered yes to that. And I think it's important to share because, as Gabriel has referred to, a lot of people might get involved in competition manipulation, A, because they weren't aware of the risks, they didn't know what it was about, or B, because they're also manipulated into thinking that no one will find out and that they can probably get away with it. But the reality is that, especially in the last few years, our methods of being able to detect competition manipulation has quite improved quite drastically, I'd say, in the last few editions of the games. So just to give you an overview on how that works, is that we have a partnership, a collaboration across different stakeholders. So the sports movements, that is the IOC, the international federations, the National Olympic Committees. We work hand in hand with sports betting operators and sports betting regulators from around the world, as well as law enforcement entities that we work very closely with. For example, Interpol, Europol, police entities from across the different countries. So together, this group, sports movement, law enforcement, and sports betting operators, we have a joint intelligence platform on information sharing. It's called the IBIS, Integrity Betting Intelligence System. And you can find out more about it online. But just to give you an overview how that works, especially during games times, but other competitions as well, all events, specifically at the Olympic Games, are monitored. So like Gabriel said, it's not the #1 final that's going to be watched. Every single event in every single discipline has a dedicated team watching the event at the games, as well as watching the betting market associated to the game. So if there is any irregular betting patterns, then that can be analyzed very quickly as well. And if there is a pattern which leads to a serious suspicion that an athlete, coach, referee has been involved in altering the competition, then that can go ahead quite quickly to have an investigation launched as well. This, of course, is also accompanied by the reporting mechanism that we'll talk about later. So there's also, of course, an avenue of us finding out information from athletes and entourage that can help us out as well. So it's really not that hard to be detected, and those kind of things now, more than ever, can be picked up very quickly. But aside from all this serious and scary stuff, there are ways to make sure that you can protect yourself, make sure that you don't get caught up in any of these potential violations of competition manipulation. And the choice really lies with you. We talked earlier, you mentioned your experience earlier, Laura also hinted at this, but there are cases where athletes might be approached, where athletes are encouraged by entourage members to alter the competition. But at the end of the day, it does come down to the athlete that is involved on the field of play, on whether or not they choose to be told what to do and to be a victim of these violations, or whether they choose to be an actor of change and play their part in protecting their sport as well. So on the next slide, you'll see some ways that we can help out and ways for you to know if you're ever confronted with a situation, if you're ever faced with a potential approach, then you know exactly how you should be reacting or responding to that. For this, we have 4 very key, simple rules that you need to be aware of. And if you know those 4 rules, then you're sorted for all the other competitions that you're going to have in your lifetime. So we'll go through one by one for each of the rules. Laura, maybe you want to kick us off for the first ones?
Sure, with pleasure, Rita. I hope you can hear me well. So as you said, 4 key rules. The first one being don't fix for whichever reason, whether it brings you to an easier opponent in the next round of your tournament, whether it can help a teammate, as Olia mentioned. In the end, it's fixing, and this can be detected, as Rita explained, and this is a breach of the rules on competition manipulation. So make sure you always do your best and you don't fix either the part or the outcome of your competition. I think this one is quite clear and instinctive for all of the athletes listening, I hope. And then if we move on to slide number 2, which is a little bit more specific. So don't bet. So it means all accredited persons to the Olympic Games, but to any major competition in your sport, are not allowed to bet on the event itself. So if I'm at the Olympic Games, I'm not allowed to bet on any event at the Olympic Games, and also on your own sport, whether or not you are participating. Even if you are a swimmer from Australia and you aren't taking part in the World Championships in Hungary, you are not allowed to bet. So to go into a little bit more detail for this specific rule, because this is really the one where we see the most lack of awareness from the athletes, and which is really the trap for athletes not to fall in. We have put together 3 short questions, situations for you. So if we go to the first question, and this is for you, feel free to answer. Well, we didn't put A, B, or C, but let's imagine the A, B, or C in the answer options. Let's just answer in the chat. So as an athlete, are you allowed to bet on yourself? A being yes, as long as I am competing to win. B, no, I'm never allowed. Or C, sometimes it depends on the individual situation. So I see a lot of B, no, never. Absolutely, I don't want to spend too much time on this question. Thank you for answering, but absolutely, if you are an athlete, just don't bet. Just be safe, don't bet, whether it's on your sport or not, whether you are taking part in the competition or not, don't place a bet. Second question would be, as an athlete, are you allowed to lose on purpose? A, yes, if it means I'll get an easy opponent in the next round. Yes, if I have already qualified and I want to help another competitor or avoid an injury. Or C, I'm never allowed to lose on purpose. C, absolutely. And maybe we move to the next rule, to the next slide regarding information, so that we can share specific details about sharing inside information. I'll give it back to you, Rita, for this one, if you agree.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Laura. And I noticed we just got a Q&A question as well about this topic. So the rule is don't share inside information. What is inside information? Inside information is basically all information that you know or are aware of because of your position on the team. So whether you're an athlete, a doctor, a coach, this information is private and confidential information, and it needs to stay within the team. And you are privileged to know this information because of the role that you have in the team. So as such, you also have a responsibility to keep this information to yourself. Now, this information can be, for example, medical information, anything related to your health, mental health, physical health, and also, of course, about the health of your teammates, anyone else on your team. That kind of information needs to stay within the team. Secondly, there can also be, for example, strategic information. So information related to gameplay, team tactics, team strategy, anything that the coach has discussed with your team in terms of how you're going to play the next round. In team sports, for example, things like team lineup, which athletes are going to be starting the game. Those kind of pieces of information, that is also considered confidential and should not be shared outside of the team. What's important to remember is you might think that no one is interested in the kind of information you know, but at the end of the day, there will be people looking around and trying to find this kind of information. So you always need to be alert, especially during competition. Just be aware. And even if there are some, innocent fans, for example, that come up to you and ask you questions, you need to stop and make sure that you don't say anything that isn't already public information. And of course, the same also goes for your family and your friends. We had a recent example also where one player on a team told his brother some information about other players on his team, and his brother was also actually an athlete on a different team. And the first brother was investigated for having shared inside confidential information. So basically, it doesn't matter who it is, family, friends, strangers, other colleagues. If you have access to inside information, it needs to remain inside. As an example, just for us to kind of get our heads around it, we're going to show you some sample social media posts. So I just want to get your initial idea about whether you think it will be okay to post or not. So this is the first one. It's an Instagram post from an athlete, and the caption is, "Great start, competition day. I've not slept a wink. Can't breathe through my nose, full of cold. Wish me luck, I'm going to need it." So I just want to get your ideas. You can type in the chat box whether you think it's okay to post, whether you think it's not okay to post, or if you have any other comments as well. Happy to see what you think. Maybe we just give it 5-10 seconds and see what you guys think. Not okay. Not okay to post it. Great. Look, we're on the right track. Again, it might seem innocent. The athlete's not really intending on doing anything wrong. But the rule is, if it's something related to your medical condition, your health, that could be used for betting purposes if it's in the wrong hands. And as such, you would not be able to share it on your social media platform. So absolutely correct, not okay. We'll try one more. The next one is a Facebook post. It says, "I cannot wait for tomorrow. Let the games begin. Hashtag Rio 2016. Do you think this kind of post will be acceptable, not acceptable? Any other thoughts? Okay, acceptable. Okay, so we've got mostly okays. Perfect. So this one would be absolutely fine. And the reason for that is that the caption is talking about participating in the games, which is public information if you're competing. And it also has a picture from the opening ceremony, which is publicly available. So there's no inside information being released here. And then we have one last one as well. The last one is a Facebook post as well from an athlete. The caption is, "Let's go team, like the coach said, let's defend." And there is an image of a training session or a briefing session. Nice. Okay. Okay, so looks like we're all on the same page. Exactly as someone said in the comments, the reason that this kind of post would not be okay is because it is referring to strategy and gameplay and what the coach has discussed. Not to mention the actual picture is also from a training session, and maybe in another image you could actually even see what the coach is doing on the whiteboard. So this kind of thing would definitely not be okay. I also noted someone in the comments said best not to post anything, which is absolutely a golden rule. We say the same thing for things like betting, for example. If you're ever confused, the best thing is to just not go there. Don't post anything in case you're not sure. Once competition is over, it's probably okay. But when things like these come up during competition, that's when it can get a bit problematic. So protect yourself the best you can. Other things you can definitely post are, like I said, anything that's public information. If there's a news article about you, if there is a photo of you competing, those kind of things are already publicly known and don't carry information about the game. So you're okay to share those kind of things. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, if there's any more questions, we can, of course, talk about it at the end as well. But now if we go to the final rule, which is rule number 4, speak up, which is about always reporting. And this is the final and perhaps the most critical rule in order to help us stop competition manipulation. You might think it's a very obvious rule, but here is what the problem is. We know athletes who have been approached to manipulate and they've said no, they've declined the offer. Great, good work. However, they did later end up getting in trouble because they hadn't reported the approach. We've also had situations where athletes were aware that their teammates were involved in betting, or they might have been involved in fixing, but those athletes also got in trouble later when the first athlete was investigated because they were aware and they didn't report it. So not speaking could actually get you into trouble, which is why it's really important that if you do suspect something, if you witnessed something, and of course, if you yourself are approached, then you do need to formally make a report. And I'll tell you how in a second how you can do that. But the reason for this is, of course, because even if you decline, there is nothing stopping that manipulator from going around and approaching your other teammates, other athletes. So when they do get caught, you could then also be investigated for not having spoken up. And it's great to let your coach know or your family members know if this happens. But for the purposes of the rule, you do need to make a formal report. And you can do that in a few different ways. Depending on your country, you might be able to report it to your National Olympic Committee, see if they have this information available on the website. Depending on your sport, you will always be able to report it to your federation, your international federation. Either they have their own mechanism to report, or they have an integrity contact person that you can also report it to. And then thirdly, regardless of the situation, you will always have access to the IOC integrity hotline. That's the link that you see on the slide. You'll also get the link at the end as part of the resources after the webinar. But you can always go to this link anonymously if you want and report what it is that you need to report. And that would also be fulfilling your obligation. So remember, in order to protect yourself, the best thing you can do is speak up. And then not only have you made sure that you've protected yourself, but you're also doing your part in protecting your sport going forward. I understand that this is not too different to what you also have for doping, Olya. So I'll ask you to jump in and talk about Reveal.
Of course, and we'll go very quickly to be able to address the questions in the Q&A as well, as some are coming in. So very, very briefly, we do have a whole separate webinar on whistleblowing, as it's a very challenging topic in itself, the decision-making behind whistleblowing. So feel free to go to the ITA YouTube channel if you want to watch that session. It's been recorded, but we also have an integrity platform, a speak up platform called Reveal. And what's important to note about the technology now is that it has evolved in many ways. So if you're not sure whether what you're seeing is worth reporting, you can always open a secure inbox to have a conversation first with an intelligence expert to find out what the next steps would be. So I think that's a very fantastic tool that would protect you and also allow you to understand what the process is before you decide to report. Okay, so very quickly on the role of entourage, I'm going to come back to you, Laura, if we spend 2 or 3 minutes here and then we go straight to the Q&A to leave time for audience questions.
Thank you, Olia. No, very briefly mentioning that as an athlete support personnel, as a coach, medical staff, a manager, or even a family member, you are in direct contact with the athletes. So you really have a role to play in sharing this information to make sure the athletes are informed and protected against the risk of competition manipulation. So for this, 3 main things you can do. First one, be aware of the problem, aware of its existence. Second, know the rules, the 4 key rules that we have explained. And third, inform your athletes. I just want to mention here that we have an educational toolbox available online to anyone in.
Did we lose Laura there? I think so. Rita, you're still here. Gabrielle is still here. Yeah. We did so well for an hour and 21 minutes.
That's the limit.
So I think Laura was talking about the toolbox, if I'm not mistaken, and we have a link in the resources. But if we go into our last slide of the presentation, we can also quickly talk about the social science research that shows why the role of entourage is so important. There was a question that came in through the chat that said, what is our role after the webinar? Well, of course, your role is to be proactive and to educate your athletes, your athlete support personnel, to empower yourself with information. As coaches and entourage have absolutely the most influence. Those that have a trusty relationship with their athletes are extremely influential. So that means that both, so the athlete entourage can both facilitate, but they can also prevent doping, they can prevent competition manipulation. So we hope that you choose to do that for your athletes and athlete support personnel. Excellent, so let's quickly take a look at the resources. I see Laura is back. We made it almost through the whole presentation without any technical challenges, so happy to have you back here. This next slide will show you a few links. There have been questions on whether or not you'll receive the presentation. You will receive it, and you can click all the links here. So you can learn more. You can watch the videos on the IOC Prevention of Competition Manipulation page as well. So feel free to use these. The PowerPoint slides will come your way in about an hour, within the hour of this presentation. Okay, just quickly, Gabrielle, I want to wrap up here with a last question for you. Any general advice for athletes, athlete support personnel listening in? We've been focusing on education and prevention, but any final words from you?
Yes, of course. Well, as we see, we have a lot of tools and resources today. This information is very important. It's just one click of our hands. In IOC resources are available in Athlete 365. Also, there are other links that we have, and we can get informed of all these topics. Also, there are short courses and webinars in different language, like the one that you are making today, Olia, and it's very important to attend and to promote this and to share with fellow athletes and all the entourage of sports organizations. To the sports organizations, it's very important to promote this and to give the resources so like athlete commissions can promote this in their countries. Also to make sports federations and associations some local webinars and activities to so everyone can be aware of these kind of things. Coaches plays a very important role, as you said, you just said, and the athletes trust in them, so they play a very important role as an educators. And for the veteran athletes, it's important that they start talking to young fellow athletes. In that way, we can help to educate them. And if you're an athlete, remember you have a very important job as a role model for them and also for the society. And always before making a decision is my final information. always before making a decision, think on all the work you have done to be in the position that you are today. And if you see suspicious conduct, report it. Always make decisions based on your values, be clean, and always make the right decision. Integrity don't have a price. So in that way, we can help to prevent this kind of attitudes and also to have a clean sport for all of us.
Thank you, Gabriel. You couldn't have wrapped it up better than that. And let's now we are short on time today, so thank you very much to everyone who's been patiently listening to us and participating over the last 85 minutes. I will go now to the question from David Miranda Pina, which is in French, so I will do a quick translation, although Laura, you speak all the languages, and Rita. So the question is, it's true that manipulation of results concerns not only the athletes or the administrators. I think we need to go further and look at the responsibility of the public who are also part of the show. This particular question is referring to a situation in 2017 where the African boxing championships, an athlete lost a match and the public made an interruption in the ring, obliging even the officials to change the result. So perhaps Laura and Rita, could you speak generally about the influence of the public on competition manipulation?
Sure, Olia, even if luckily this is not something we have witnessed ourselves at Olympic events, but we know these kind of incidents are happening, unfortunately. And I would say here, it reinforces our message of prevention, of, making competition manipulation and the respect of the rules by the referees, or like decided by the referees, something that also the public is aware of. This notion that results are the result, they cannot be fixed for any reason, even if I have 200 people besides me wanting to do so against one or two referees. So I think it really highlights the fact that we need to speak more about match fixing as an integrity issue like any other in sport.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. A question now from Mr. Gobi. Thank you so much for being here with us. Referring to educational activity resources available for trainers to teach athletes on this topic. Would that be the toolbox then? Yes.
Absolutely. Sorry, I thought I was on mute. Absolutely. Please, I can only invite you to access the toolbox. And if you need something more specific to your sport, please feel free to also to contact us by email. We also have a whole bunch of communication assets and text that you can use for your social media or any communication channels that you have. We'll be happy to provide those materials to you.
Excellent. There's an email address on the screen, both ours and the competition manipulation unit. So feel free to reach out to all of us. One last question that I will address before we wrap up. And is it possible for athletes to be sanctioned for the posts? And I guess that refers to the post that Rita went through on social media.
Yes, great question. Look, I'm not in an effort to try and scare the athletes. You're not going to get in trouble for just having posted one of the examples that I showed. The problem turns up when you might post something, that information is then used by manipulators or by people trying to manipulate the betting market. And then if that does happen and that is detected, it could then come back to the initial post. And then potentially the athlete could be subject to sanctions if it's deemed that their post had a part to play in the manipulation. In the post alone, it's not going to necessarily get you in trouble. It's just where that information that you share might lead you to. So I don't want to rule it out, but by itself, we're not going to be sending someone to jail or giving someone a fine because they shared information about their health.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of stuff that is on social media cannot be deleted, even if you hit the delete button. There are screenshots, there are recordings, so be extra careful. We didn't have a chance to answer all the questions, but please do reach out to us. We answer all the questions that come to our inbox. and the Olympic manipulation, competition manipulation unit at the IOC will do the same. And so please do reach out to us if we haven't answered a question or an inquiry that you have. So that wraps up today's session. A big thank you to Gabriel, to Rita, to Laura, to everyone who has been participating, answering questions, asking us questions. We really appreciate your attention. And we'll be back online next month with a new topic. In the meantime, we welcome you to stay in touch with us and reach out anytime. And of course, please do fill out the survey that you receive after the webinar to give us your feedback and to help us make these sessions better. So it's a good afternoon for me in Switzerland, but I wish you a good morning, good night, wherever you are in the world. And thank you once again for joining. We'll see you online soon. Bye for now.